Buddy, welcome back to another Hoff Time Report. And we're here with Rosa Martinez, who is a candidate for state senate, running against Chuck Winder, the Senate President pro tem, who, by the way, we've invited to be on the show. And actually, he was going to be on our show at one point, was scheduled to be in, even agreed to be interviewed, and then backed out at the last minute. That was a month or two ago. But anyway, Rosa's here, running for the Republican nomination. Boy, running against the Senate President pro tem. You're new to politics, really, aren't you?
I am. I mean, I've been around the Capitol for years, but this definitely is my first run and nothing that I ever thought of before doing. But sometimes you have to step up, and that's what I'm doing.
What set you off? What's the thing that made you said, I'm going to take on the Senate pro tem of all people?
Well, it just so happened to be that he was the senator in my district. It's not like I moved to seek him out. He just happened to be the one in my district. But basically, I had been at the Capitol for years, and I just watched all the bills that were pretty much written for the people. They would get to the Senate and die. So, here we are.
What kinds of bills are you talking about?
So we had this past year, we had the grocery tax bill, the gas tax, both of them trying to be repealed. And that didn't happen. Instead, they gave us, what was it, $20 in 2 years. They just gave Meta millions of dollars, and we can't even get a repeal on our gas tax with such an inflation, or our grocery tax with such an inflation. We're one of, I believe, 7 states that still tax our groceries. And that was one of the things that we had been promised would be repealed, and we're still waiting. So that's just one of them.
That's a lot to put on one person. So why? I mean, how much of that is attributable, do you think, to Chuck Winder? Now, by way of background, the gas tax bill never actually got out of the House. It's
Right.
arguable there's an effort to bring the grocery tax bill to the floor, which leadership fought against. So perhaps you can put that on him. I suspect you can also argue he's the one that single-handedly killed the bill that would have banned transgender youth surgeries and procedures, vaccine mandate protections.
And that was one of my main one, was the vaccine protection. We worked really hard to get that passed through the House, and it just died in the Senate. The other one he
didn't have a
boasted
vote.
about. I'm sorry?
It did not have a vote.
No. It passed, 140 actually passed the House, and then it died in the Senate. The mask mandate was heard and I believe passed in the House, but nothing in the Senate. We also had the obscene materials in schools and libraries. He boasted about killing that. I've seen those books, and they're graphic.
So is it that he's acted unilaterally against those items, or is it that the Senate collectively refused to go along? Tell me what your thinking is about Senator Winder's role in those issues.
Well, he boasted about putting certain bills in certain committees so they do die. So I do blame him for that.
So what would you be doing differently, as let's say that you were elected to the state Senate?
Well, I do believe that every citizen has the right to have their voice heard. And if a bill comes through, it should be voted on. I do strongly believe you can just as easily vote yes or no, right? And so I believe that the citizens should have a say on what they want heard. And if they're pushing hard, and you have lobbyists like IACI, we had Senator Patrick tell us to our face that 140 will never be heard in the Senate because IACI doesn't want that heard. That to me is a huge violation.
So is it the special interest groups that are a problem, or is it the leadership of the Senate, or is it both?
I think it's both, because I think if you had good, strong leadership, we wouldn't have the lobbyists being a problem, right? Because we would just have the flow of the bills coming through. But that's not the case. We had a couple bills come through that we thought were going to be heard on the House, and then they stalled. And I asked the House representative why, and he was quite angry. And he goes, well, because Bradley called the Senate, and now I don't have a sponsor on that side. So now it's not going to go anywhere.
So what would you be doing differently if you were in the state Senate?
100% transparency. Because a lot of people don't even understand what's happening. And, if I wasn't there, I wouldn't know either. It's not like you can listen to the news and have, truth there. They're not even covering what's happening. You can't really go online because, again, everything that's printed isn't always what's really happening, and that's unfortunate because we, the people, should know. And we can't always be there all day long, but it takes a good representative to send out the emails, to respond to emails, which my opponent is not doing at all. I'm still waiting 3 years later for an email response back.
On what
And
topic?
I'm not the only one.
On what topic did you contact him?
My focus on that one was specifically to find out what his stance and why we were not hearing HB 140. That bill was written to protect all the citizens, especially the ones who had contracts with the state. So that would be our firefighters, our police, our nurses, our teachers from vaccine mandates. And that one just stalled.
The argument's been made that businesses have the right to tell their customers, their employees, their vendors what kind of mandates they want to put on: mask mandates, vaccine mandates. What's your view on that?
So I do believe that businesses do have some leeway on what they prefer to do, right? But when it comes to violating the Constitution, nobody can do that. Not a private business, not the government, nobody. And I really do believe that we should stick to that. We had the case with the what was it, the same-sex wedding cake, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they lost, and here we go. That is honestly no different. Everyone screams, oh, my body, my choice, unless it's not what they want, or it doesn't fall into their scope of things. So,
how would you categorize yourself in terms of on the political spectrum? Are you a conservative, a moderate, a leftist? How do you define yourself?
I'm a constitutional conservative Republican.
Are you a common sense conservative Republican?
I would say so.
Because sometimes that's used to define the leftist Republicans. That's why I ask. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's all wordsmithing.
Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about common sense, my opponent says that he's a conservative Republican, right? But the more he throws money at government problems, the bigger the problem. We're not actually fixing it. So to me, common sense would be, hey, let's actually dig in and see what's going on and actually fix the problem instead of throwing more money at it.
What are the problems in state government that you are speaking of?
Well, let's talk about the schools. So we keep throwing millions of dollars at our schools instead of looking and digging, where's the money going that we actually already are throwing in there, right? When in West Ada alone, which is in my district, the superintendent there, last time I looked, made more money than the governor. That's a problem. Why are teachers making pennies on the dollar and we'll call leadership, they're making over $100,000, We should be making sure that every dollar is accounted for. What curriculum are we purchasing. How much from whom can we get it, a better curriculum for less money? Let's actually delve into it. When I worked in the federal system, I had the budget for the year. And towards the end of the year, if we had left over, we had to make sure that we spent it all. So the following fiscal year, we would get that much plus a percent more, right? So I cannot even begin to tell you the amount of pens, fancy chairs, Post-its, just random nonsense we didn't need, just so like that we had that buffer. Well, what's that
You
saying
might
to the taxpayer?
you think that's happening in Idaho?
I don't know. I'd like to look into it.
You might want to give a little bit about your background. I know you told me a little bit, as we talked over the phone and in person the other day. But for the viewers who don't know what your background is and your involvement in government, explain that
Mm-hmm.
if you would.
So I grew up in the military, and I grew up overseas. I've been everywhere, but I'm from nowhere. I'm a certified crime intelligence analyst, and as was my dad. So I've pretty much been in the federal system my whole life. And so I've done some city, some county, and then mostly federal. And so being a certified crime intelligence analyst, I look at crimes, but I also look at numbers. I look at money. I follow the money, and I figure how things are working and why and how to catch a criminal, basically. So I did a lot of white collar crime. But it's honestly no different than dealing with the government. And I'm not saying they're, let's not go there, but I'm saying fiscal responsibility should be part of just throwing money at. Why are we spending that much? What is it for? Where is it going? And is it actually beneficial? Right?
It's interesting because the budget for the public schools has basically doubled in a decade. It used to be about a little more than $1 billion, now north of $2 billion. So you are suspicious then that maybe some of that money is not being well spent. Do you see that in the results?
Well, I mean, I can tell you that testing wise, we're not doing that well compared to the rest of the country. The salaries are for the teachers themselves are pretty low, but it looks like the district, people are making a lot more than, you know, I think the average, we'll
The
say.
administration, you mean?
Right.
So superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, people who are not in the classroom, if you will.
Right. And like I said, it's something that I would like to delve into and actually look into. We had the bill of, what was it, $4.9 million or $6 million that came from a special interest group to bring special teachings to the preschool and the kindergartners. Well, when they started looking into it and we figured that out, we had a lot of people saying, hey, it's just money, let's bring it in. Well, there's strings attached to that, just like the strings that were attached to the FEMA money. So we
You're
just have to be
referring
aware.
you're referring to the $6 million that would have gone to the Idaho Association for the Education of Young Children, the
Mm-hmm.
grant program that arguably was going to be used to indoctrinate kids into the social justice leftist movement. And
Right.
the legislation failed. Now in the Senate it passed. It had failed in the House, and one of the key votes was by Chuck Winder. In fact, he got up on the Senate floor and he said, "My vote's probably not going to make much of a change in the outcome here, but I'm voting in favor of it." And then it passed the Senate 18-17. Is that
Mm-hmm.
one that was of a concern to you, and as goes your race for Senate? And is that something people remember? Are they talking to you about that? Has it come up as a point of issue for
I
the
think a
voters in your
lot of
district?
people don't even realize, to be honest, what they heard was him going on the news and saying, well, good for me, I stopped this, crazy and mischievous bill. The people who put this through are crazy and mischievous. when really what we were trying to do is stop this pornographic material from getting to our children. You know I just heard today Nampa pulled 24 books out of their libraries.
He said that the biggest threat to democracy, that's his word. I don't choose to use the word democracy in describing our system of government. His words were the greatest threat to democracy in Idaho today is the Idaho Freedom Foundation. What do you think is the greatest threat to democracy, or to the Republican form of government, I should say, that we have?
I think the greatest threat to the republic, because we live in a republic, is probably the insurgence of, we'll say, the left wing, a lot of corporate. It looks like, just from my looking at, we have a lot of influx of the Marxist and the communist ideas coming in a lot harder now, or maybe I'm just paying attention to it more. I'm not sure. But I pulled my children out of public school because, one, my kids cannot be masked, nor will they. And two, I'm worried about the lack of education that they were getting. So
What do you think the legislature should do about that? I
well,
guess
I think we need,
the indoctrination and the performance, I think, are probably two separate issues. But what would you do to address those if you could wave a magic wand or cast a vote that you feel is necessary to fix the problem?
well, I would vote a lot in line with how Ron Nate has. You know, he seemed to be on the same page as I would. I would look into what is being taught. I would look into the cost of what's being taught and where that money is going, right? And I would be sure that any outside money, which I don't understand why we're taking any outside money for our schools when we're being taxed so much for it as is, right? And that's why I looked to see how much the superintendent was making in regards to how much the teachers are making. And it's a huge gap. So that's one thing that I would look at. The other thing I would look at is bringing civics classes back to schools. That's huge. If we cannot teach our children, what our country was founded on and how important it is and the proper process of standing up and ensuring our republic.
I wonder if I'm frozen or you're frozen. I lost Rosa. Not sure what to do just here. Stick with me for just a minute as we're having technical difficulties, it looks like, and I'm gonna try to get her back because I wanna continue the discussion. Yeah, it's live TV, ladies and gentlemen, and I guess this is what happens when you're live and stuff breaks. So I'm gonna use the old cell phone here to see if we can get her back.
Hi there.
I think you're gonna want to hit that. There you go. You're back. Okay. I don't know what happened. Can you hear me? Uh-oh. Now I can't hear you. Man, the technology is just terrible today. Are you muted, perhaps? You're not muted. Can you hear me? You can't hear me. Well, this is kind of a problem. Let me see what we can do here. I'm going to call your cell phone.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, I don't know if I could hear you. Try talking without my phone up. Yeah, I'm just hearing you through the phone. The question is, can everybody listening hear you? Go ahead and speak, and we'll see if it works. Go ahead and speak.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, I'm gonna wait for the chat to say whether they can hear you or not.
Okay.
So if you're in the chat, can you hear Rosa?
No.
No, the answer is no. I think the answer is
Okay.
no.
Should I leave and get back in?
Well, we just tried that, so I'm not really sure what you can say that
Oh,
on the phone. Oh, now I'm hearing the answer is yes. Okay, so let's keep going. Good.
okay. There we
Woo!
go.
Technology, crazy. Okay, so pick up where you left off.
So basically, I was just saying that I have friends. I'm married to a fire captain, so a lot of our friends are law enforcement or fire or nurses. And so we had some friends come and apply for the fire department and for some law enforcement positions. And they had a take, and I saw they gave me some pictures of it. They're like, you won't believe this. And so I have pictures that it shows they're being asked random questions like, wait, if you see a black man in a hoodie with a gun, it's obvious he's up to no good.
Wow.
It's like, but who? That what does that have to do with becoming a fireman or becoming a law enforcement? That has nothing to do. The other question was, you should feel sorry for low income communities, and you have to rate these things 1 to 5.
Wow.
And so I, of course, started doing some digging because that's what I love to do. And I found that many of our fire and law enforcement here in Idaho are using the same company to do these testing.
Yeah,
And
we've
I'm like,
we've seen that. Yeah. And there's stuff like that that's going on. Yeah, there's stuff like that that's going on in the public school system. They actually, if you in our social justice report that we released in December, we describe school districts hiring these companies, these consultancies, and they are steeped in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so the questions that are being asked of kids or comments being directed at kids are designed to divide the country and kids into oppressed and oppressors. And it's interesting because I presume that based on your last name that you have some experience with this, that you've been subjected to some of this yourself.
well, I get a lot of, wow, you're Rosa Martinez and you have red hair and green eyes. I didn't expect that. But the truth is, my mom is from Spain. My dad was in the military, and they met overseas, got married, and years later had my sister and I. My mom has a very heavy accent. We spent many, many years abroad. And when she came to the U.S., she had to wait her time, go through her classes, and then take her test, and pay her money. And she was very, very excited to be an American. But at the same time, we were in Southern California. That's where we got stationed when we came stateside. And so we had a lot of influx from Mexico and, let's see, it's having, can you hear me better? Worse?
Hang on a second. Keep going. I think
Okay.
yeah, it's not the ideal sound, but it seems to be working.
Okay. So anyway, so my mom did have to wait her time and, go through the process. While she was waiting, she became a nurse here, and she actually worked through the whole AIDS pandemic. And there was no shutdown. There was, no weirdness or anything like that. She just put in her shift. My dad, was in law enforcement. He put in his shift. Wear your gloves, wash your hands, and have a good day, right? So, it's just so different now. And
why do you think that is?
I think it's been a slow progression of, the Marxism coming through. My son, was in public school when they shut down all the schools here. And so we opted for the online. Well, we had to do online first, and then we opted for the online because I wasn't going to send them to school with the mask mandate. So my son, my oldest, had to write a report on how great it would be in America if 16-year-olds were allowed to vote.
Hmm.
He was in, I think, 5th grade then.
Wow.
And so we sat and we had a conversation. And I said, well, what are your thoughts? And he's like, yeah, I don't really think I care about voting. And I was like, well, because that's not where your mind is, right? But at that time, he was in 5th grade, so he wasn't anywhere near 16. So I started, talking to him. I had a nephew who was 16, and I said, well, do you think that he would make the right decision? And he's like, no, I don't think he pays that much attention. And I said, okay, well, what do you think is a good voter? And he's like, someone who shows up. That's not wrong. And I said, well, what else makes a good voter? And he goes, someone with a pencil. Okay. And so he's supposed to write this, whole theory on, why a 16-year-old should vote. And it was just above where he should be, but it's kind of putting that little thought in his head, like, hey, when I'm 16, I should vote too, just because. And obviously I sat down with him and I'm like, this is the process of everything and, the growth and, how you evolve as a person. And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. He's like, because honestly, I'd just rather go out and skateboard. And I was like, well, I'd rather you go out and skateboard too, bud. So
I thought it was interesting because, a lot of these, by the way, let me know if you can hear better with the phone up to my earphones, because that's what I'm doing. Oh, now I screwed it up because I killed the audio. Hang on, I'm going to call you back. Technology. I'm bringing you back. Sorry, I just hung up on you. Oh,
no, you're good.
Technology. Okay, so let me know in the chat if this sounds better. I'm just holding it up to my earbuds, so I'm hoping it'll sound better. But I thought it's really interesting that a lot of elected officials, like the superintendent of public instruction, she's got a panel of youth. She's got like an education advisory panel, and they've got 4th graders on there. And I'm thinking, why does the superintendent of public instruction need a 4th grader to tell her how to run the Department of Education? What is that? It's just strange to me. Anyway,
I would say I would question what kind of, because your brain hasn't developed enough. What are they going to provide? Unless you're going to ask a 4th grader, hey, what are you learning? What are, how do you like to learn? My youngest has dyslexia. And so it's been very difficult for him. And we were lucky he went into a charter school, but we pay a lot of money ourselves to get him to occupational therapy and get him, different tools, in his little bucket to use. And so that's been great, but not everyone can do that, and there's visual learners, there's audio, there's, textile learners. And so we have to make sure that we're teaching all of the kids in their way. Right? What you're teaching, you should do all of them.
Do you support an education savings account for youngsters or a voucher system?
I would, for those who want it. So I do believe that the money should follow the student, but I would have to look into the strings that are attached. Again, that's our taxpayer money. So I would want to maybe do like a rebate. So you put in your taxes, this is how much I spent on the school up to such and such amount, and you can get that back on your taxes. Something of that sort.
Yeah, that's there are states that do that. That's essentially a tax credit. A lot of states do it that way, give you a tax credit, and then you use that money to fund your private school tutors or whatever. The bill that was considered in the Idaho legislature this year would have created an education savings account, but there's a lot of different ways to get there. It's just a question of, are you supportive of some kind of education choice? And there are legislators that don't.
I am, because I think that, we live in a capitalistic, society. So if you have one school that is, getting a lot more of the students, and the other one's probably going to think, hey, I kind of need to step up my game, right? Because that's how it works. So I would support something like that. But again, I know that there's homeschoolers that don't want to have the strings attached to, to the state money, right? And we have to look at the federal money coming in and the strings attached to that. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done and things that need to be figured out. But I do believe that it should be the parental right to make those decisions.
I want to get to some other topics too, because since we're just getting to know you and your political philosophy, I want to run through several different ideas and concepts just to gauge where you are. First of all, before I forget, let me just take some funding of state agencies. Should the government be in the television business? Should we have an Idaho Public Television, or should we be funding Boise State Public Radio with National Public Radio?
So again, it comes down to budget and our tax money. I think the less we tax the people, the better we are. And then again, where is this money? How is this money being used? Is it actually being transparent? Is it something that's non-biased? Is it just actual journalism, which both of those seem to be lacking now? I'm a type of gal that I just like the facts. I'm smart enough to make my own decisions. And I think most of us are, if not all, right? So I would really look at and put strict strings to that. I do enjoy having the video at the Capitol because we can watch it and we can see firsthand if we can't be there. So I do appreciate that, but I do think that there's other means of doing that to where we don't have to tax people.
Yeah, there are states that have nonprofit organizations that run the streaming service for the legislature. It's the programming part that I just don't get. I don't know why the state's in the broadcast business. And back in the '60s, maybe they needed and I needed in quotation marks. I'd argue the point, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt for just now. Maybe they needed a broadcast system that connected the state with educational materials, but don't you get that with the internet now?
Pretty much. And I think my thing is less taxes and so you still get more. I don't think that that's the government's job. The government's job is to keep our rights, right? Not to televise things and not to give money to media to be used against the people, basically, is what we're seeing.
There you go. Let's talk about tax incentives right now, because especially where you are, the state gave a ton of money to Facebook to locate a data center in southwest Idaho near Kuna. Do you think the state should provide tax incentives? And I'm not just talking about Meta and Facebook or Meta/Facebook. Should the state give tax incentives to businesses to move to Idaho?
No, not at all. What we're seeing happen is in Idaho, our Constitution states that we must have a balanced budget. So we've been allowing all of this growth to happen, and we've been bringing in the tax money, right? But we're not having a real balanced budget in my point of view, right? Because we don't have the infrastructure, and that's going to take money, which means more tax dollars that we're going to have to pay. We don't have the sewers, we don't have the schools built, we don't have, the fire stations, police stations, just the infrastructure itself. We don't have that. Yet we are giving so much money, case in point, to Meta to bring in the sewer system, to do this, that, and the other. That's not their job. That's our job. And if we're going to allow all these buildings and, all these people to come in, that's wonderful. But let's make sure that we can actually provide for that, right? Last year, we were in a severe drought. This year, most of Idaho was just put in another severe drought. We just gave away our water to Meta for this data center that came in very discreetly, and I have a lot of questions about that. There's a lot of kinky stuff going on.
to put it mildly. Um, what about, I mean, just off the cuff types of issues that don't get near enough attention? And it's interesting because with your husband being a firefighter, I'm very curious what your thoughts are on the state pension system and whether the state could do better by public employees, or maybe the system is just fine. What are your thoughts on Percy and it's a pretty expensive program for taxpayers, but some people argue that it's an expensive necessity.
Well, I don't know too much about the Idaho system. That's one thing that I will be looking more into. But I do know that, you know, in other departments or even in the federal system that I came from, we do put in a lot more. And I haven't delved too much into Idaho, like I said, but I think that we should be able to not overdo it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like everything should be balanced. But I also have a huge question: how much are we paying for medical? Right? Because in LA, it was the police chief of LAPD put out a kind of an article, and it was a letter stating that the FBI had contacted them. They used Blue Cross Blue Shield for their insurance, and Blue Cross Blue Shield has been selling all of the police and the fire, all the county and city employees' medical data to a third company, which had ties to the CCP. So we just had a bill, this last one, where we were going to put teachers on that very same system, right? Which our state, I'm believing, and our county are also on that system. We need to be very careful where our money is going.
So to clarify,
that's one thing that I have to look into.
So to clarify, that's House Bill 448 from the last legislative session, which basically said that if you're in the school district workforce, you can be on the state insurance program, which in Idaho happens to be run by Blue Cross of Idaho, and their contract is up next year, not this year. It's up next year, and there was some concern in the legislature this session that might give them a competitive advantage when it comes to renewing the contract. But getting back to the Percy, the question that had arisen is, sure, okay, firefighters, they wear, lots of heavy equipment on their backs, their bodies wear out earlier, letting them retire when they're 50 perhaps makes some amount of sense. At least that's the argument. But now you've got dispatchers, juvenile corrections officers, and so on, who are now eligible to retire under Rule of 80, which essentially lets them ordinarily when they're 50. And people who are on desk jobs as police officers are not patrolling the streets; they're sitting at a desk like any other secretarial position and so on, and they're retiring at 50 years old. A very expensive program. 20% of an employee's paycheck goes into Percy.
So they are putting into it. That much I do understand. Let's say I know at my husband's department, they have to hit 20. I think it's 20 and 50. So they have to put in their 20 years and be over 50. So that kind of balances. I'm not sure what the actual numbers are here. Like I said, I haven't really looked into it, but I know that their bodies get beat down. A lot of them don't even make it that long. They're being put out on medical, which is more expensive in the long run.
That's okay. I don't expect that you're going to know all the answers to all the questions, and I appreciate it when you say you don't know. That's always a perfectly appropriate answer to a question. Back to taxes, property taxes, huge problem. What would you do about it?
Well, first and foremost, I know that Idaho Constitution states that property, the bonds and the levies that go on to the property taxes should be paid by those property owners. well, they're being being voted on by everyone, non-property owners. And so, of course, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I'm not paying it. What do I care, right? So I think we need to fix that first and foremost. I do believe that we're paying way too much in property taxes. I believe that those who have paid their house off, why are they still paying their government, for
Because
the land?
you're just renting. You're renting on the government's land. So you see,
Yeah,
you didn't realize that.
Yeah. And so
I laugh, but it's really not funny.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, I actually spoke to a woman in her late 70s, and she's like, we lost our home. We lost our home because I couldn't pay the property taxes, and I've been in there for over 50 years.
Yeah, that's sad.
That is, yeah, that's.
And it's happening. It's happening here in Idaho.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
do you have a solution? I mean, have you thought about how you would solve that problem?
Oh, absolutely. Idaho is amazing. We have so many resources that we're not tapping into, and I do believe that if we tapped into those resources, we would be pretty well off. We wouldn't, we should probably have some sort of, we'll say, impact tax, but I think that a lot of our taxes could be gone if logging alone, if we actually cleared that out, you know what that would mean for our firemen and for our budget, that we wouldn't have to go and clean out the federal land that we don't really get paid back. I'm sure. I don't know that for sure, but I know how the feds work. So we're sending our firemen out to basically get injured. A lot of them don't make it through, those fires. We just had a couple guys come very close to not making it. And so can you imagine how much money we would save if we just actually logged that and then sold that logging? I'm sure we could get rid of our sales tax and our grocery tax and our,
Wouldn't it be cool to get rid of the income tax, perhaps?
Well, the income tax, there's so much to look at, and I would actually need to look into all the numbers and crunch them and actually do an analysis on that. But I'm pretty sure that Idaho could be well stacked in the finances if we actually did what our Constitution says. It's amazing.
Had you been in the legislature last session, would you have voted for the income tax reduction, took the income tax from 6.5% to 6%?
Yes. I would have.
Was that enough? Should we have done more?
Well, I would have voted to repeal our grocery tax and to, even if we had our gas tax lowered for a couple years, this inflation is killing everybody. Let's face it. And it's our tax money. Our Constitution says we have to have a balanced budget. It does not say we needed to have an inflated budget, right? Or, the money coming in. So I think that by giving all the money to large corporations like Meta and Facebook, we kind of sold ourselves short, and so I think we really need to look into, one, it's the people's money, so it should go back to the people, and two, how much money do we actually need, right? So let's figure all of that out. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's cut the fat. Let's get to the bare minimum, because right now we just have so much coming in and nothing happening for the people. They voted to give away our water. They've given away our land. What more do we have but high taxes, which my opponent keeps voting for? They even raised the fees on snowmobiles. Really?
They did.
Yeah.
It was a lot too, by the way. It was like a 20% increase, if I remember right. It was pretty significant.
Yeah. Why?
Because that's how they govern. But they argue that they're governing conservatively. Do you buy that?
That doesn't sound conservative to me at all. Not even a little bit. Let's be honest. Before you raise taxes, let's make sure it's needed, right?
Is there something? All this criticism of the state government and the people who are in government. Rosa, what is there something that you do like that your opponent or the state of Idaho is doing now that you say, oh yeah, Chuck Winder got that right, or the state of Idaho's got that right? And by
I
the
would
way,
say,
go ahead. I'm sorry. One of the commenters in the chat said, remind people who we're talking to, and I apologize. We're interviewing Rosa Martinez, who's running for the state senate in District 20 against Senate Pro Tem Chuck Winder in the Republican primary. I apologize. Go ahead.
I do appreciate our abortion laws. I do believe that, the veto should not have happened. Pretty much right now, that's about it. I'm going to be honest. I think we have put Idaho in a kind of funk that we need to get out of. We had lockdown. We were put in a state of emergency that was illegal, zero checks and balances. The Senate voted to allow it to continue because they wanted the federal money. Well, that's not how life works.
What would you have done?
I would have said absolutely not. I would have stopped it. I would have brought the Senate into a quorum. I would have reconvened the Senate. It came out that I was in a special session, and I listened and I just watched how our legislature, the House, should have been allocating all that money. But instead, that money was being allocated by a committee that Bradley put in. Well, that's not how life works.
You're referring to the coronavirus, what was it called? The Coronavirus Appropriation Committee or something like that? I don't remember the exact name of it. But basically what happened was the state of Idaho received $1.6 billion from the federal government. And rather than convene the legislature, the governor handpicked a panel that included a couple of legislators, I believe, a bunch of people from the bureaucracy. The lieutenant governor was on there at one point. But it was the die had been cast, the decisions were already made, and the money was spent without input from the state legislature. And it seemed as if the legislative leadership just kind of went along with it.
Oh, yeah. And when you ask questions, they're like, oh, that's just how it is. No, I'm pretty sure we have checks and balances here for a reason. And so I had gone and I tried to talk to the AG, like, hey, what are we doing? Why are we allowing this? I got nowhere.
It all seems so strange. Is it strange to you to be involved like this, running for office and I mean, talking about these issues? I mean, you seem like you're not a political person, I guess. Or you wouldn't describe yourself as one. You're just a citizen, really.
Absolutely. I mean, our government is supposed to be of the people, for the people. When I moved here about 8 years ago, I was so excited to see that we had farmers and ranchers and, real people on there. But when I actually got in there, I was like, no, these people have been in there forever. They're not, they may have a ranch, but, the ranchers I know are working hard all day long ranching, I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying that that's not what I thought of when I was thinking a rancher was in,
in the legislature.
Yeah. So I don't know. Things are different. They're a lot more different than I thought they were. But sitting there, and with the background that I have, I kind of tend to look at things a little bit differently. And I just saw a lot of things. I actually, because I am a super nerd, I sat into, it was the committee for, I believe it was agriculture. And a gentleman was so excited. He came in and he was so happy. And I was like, wow, this guy's really rad. And so he started telling me about how, he was telling the committee how they had to let loose toss all of their produce away. And then he said that, they had a huge loss. And I was like, well, that was at the same time where our grocery stores were empty. So that would have been good to give to the people. And then he said that was like March, April, and then May, the CARES Act money came in, And then for the rest of the year, we had record-breaking profits, not including the CARES Act money. They had an extra almost $2 million plus the record-breaking profits. And I'm like, well, why would you need the CARES Act money if you had record-breaking profits? Well, because they're handing out money, so why not take it, right? No, because that's not your money. That's
the mentality. It's really stunning. A few more questions just to kind of get also just a better understanding for you. You've been in Idaho how long?
About 8 years.
Okay, so you were here for the vote on Medicaid expansion. Did you vote on that, and and if so, how did you vote?
I believe I voted no.
Okay. Do you remember why?
Because I don't believe that we should be throwing more money at something that's broken.
Fair enough answer. There's supposed to be a ballot initiative this fall that would raise the income tax, create a new top marginal bracket close to 11% for people earning over $250,000 a year, essentially to provide a bucket of money for public schools. How would you vote on that?
Probably no. And again, unless I delve into it and I actually look at the meat of everything, my answer is going to be no.
You want to see the proposal, and that's fair.
Right. And I would rather say no and have, the time to look into it. Worst case scenario, we send it back to committee and we can, look into it a little bit better. But what I've been seeing is even just in this past session, it was so slow, and we were like, this is eerie. There just aren't that many bills. And then the last, I think it was 3 weeks, they slammed in 400 bills. So they want legislators to read these 400 bills, process them, actually look into them and see what is actually going on in 3 weeks.
Do you think that's done? You think I don't know that those numbers are 100% accurate, but you get the flavor is that there was a slew of bills, right. And then this happens very typically at the end of the legislative session. They're just inundated with bills that are passing the House and Senate in rapid succession. Do you think that's done by design so people don't have a chance to look at it, or do you think it's just the nature of trying to get done with work and get to their homes as quickly as possible?
Lately, I think it's by design. So we have the Red Tape Act going on. That's been going on for 2 years.
The governor's Red Tape Reduction Act.
Mm-hmm. And that's been deregulating things like our water. It's federalized our water. Well, no one really realized that. I was sitting in the back, and I was like, wait a minute, let's look into this. Why are we going to take away Idaho's law? And they're like, oh, it's not a big deal. We have IDAPA rules. And I'm like, well, rules aren't laws, and there's no meat in those rules. So anyone can just violate them, and there's nothing we can do about it. Why don't we just keep our law? And they're like, no, sweetie, you don't understand. We also have the EPA. And I was like, yeah, no, I do understand. Let's talk about Flint, Michigan. So let's actually not federalize Idaho, because I don't think we should. I grew up in the federal system, and I'm going to go with no.
There are many instances where the state kind of surrenders its sovereignty to the federal government, and it's on healthcare issues, education issues, environmental, agriculture, you name it. It happens on a lot of different things. Should we be accepting any money from the federal government at all?
No, because all that money comes with strings. Idaho is supposed to be a sovereign state, and our Constitution states that we are our state. So why are we giving everything away? We're just handing everything away. Look at our schools. They're messed up. Look at our medical. It's screwed up. Look at, the EPA. Look what they did to the family up north. We don't need the federal government.
Which family up north are you referring to?
They had, I think it was like a small puddle or something in their yard.
Oh, the Sackett family.
Yes.
That was declared a wetland, if I remember correctly. The federal government then they declared that it was waters of the U.S. It wasn't a wetland, but they declared that it was waters of the U.S. and the feds essentially hauled them into court, and they've been fighting for years now. I think almost 15 years. I think on property that is their property on their land, belongs to them.
Yeah, so no, I don't think we need the federal government to tell us what to do. I think we're doing just fine on our own. But, you know, a lot of the legislators like that money, you know, but they just kind of give it away with all those strings.
Well, it's 45% of the state budget now. The federal money is. It's 45% of the state budget. That's a hard thing to unwind.
Well, it's not going to be done overnight, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. You know, I think if we look into it, we'll be able to find a lot of, you know, things that we just honestly don't need. You know, how many Post-its does one department need? You know, and I know Idaho is supposed to have 20 agencies. We have over 220 left, we counted?
I don't think it's that many. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 120, if memory serves. But still, you're right. The state constitution limits the number of departments to 20. And what they do is they say, okay, we have 20 departments. Now we just need to take all these. Every time we create a new agency, we're just going to call it the office of such and such under the department. So that's how they get away with it.
Well, I mean, and then they just make committees where they get to pick who's on the committee. It's going to be all their little brothers and sisters and, you know, their best friends. And they're just going to kind of sidewind all of Idaho. And here we are thinking we need water. And next thing you know, it's being funneled through a data center. No.
Funny how that works.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. So, no, I'm not a politician. But, you know, it's a republic if you can keep it. And I plan on keeping it.
Well, it's almost been an hour. Any other closing thoughts you want to share about your campaign or your thoughts about governance in the state of Idaho?
Well, first, I want to say thank you for everyone that's been watching. And I want to let everyone know I'm running a grassroots campaign. I haven't taken any donations from any large corporations, unlike my opponent. And so every dollar counts, even at the end of the road. We could put all that money to good use. We could use a lot of boots on the ground. We do door knocking. We have a lot of fun while we're out. And to foremost, don't forget to vote on May 17th and do your due diligence and, you know, vet your candidates.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there about the candidates and about voting records. Obviously, the Freedom Foundation has a lot of information. There are other organizations. Don't just take our word for it. Go look at you know, what's out there. But it's sort of important that people understand that you know, there are a lot of folks who run as Republicans and they all say they're conservative, and the data's out there. You just need to go sift through it and learn who's supporting what or who's against what, and who's voted a particular way and what their position candidates are. And I suppose if you don't know the answers or can't find the answers, and call those candidates directly and ask them, because you know, the districts here in Idaho are still small enough that people can still do that. You can still call individual candidates and individual office holders and ask them questions. And I highly encourage folks to go do that. Don't be intimidated. They're just human beings just like you and me. So
Right.
Anyway, hey, Rosa, it's really good talking with you. Thank you. Sorry about all the technical problems. I don't know, but...
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Thank you again for having me. I do appreciate it.
It's good talking with you. Thanks. And we'll see you again on the next Soft Time Report. So take care, everybody.
Perfect.
Have a good
Thank you.
day. Bye-bye.